major part in achieving peace. So I agree, a religion has to one degree created these problems, but actually people of different religious faiths working together can also be an important part of resolving these problems. And that's what we should do, and it's what we can do, and in respect of Jerusalem, it is absolutely imperative that we do.
Visitor goes to the Western Wall. Anything he can do. Visitor goes to the Western Wall, sees a man tearing at his beard, banging his head on the wall, shoving messages into it at the rate of knots, wailing and flailing, watches with fascination. When the guy finally breaks off, says, "Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing you were being unusually devout in your addresses to the wall, to the divines. Do you mind if I asked you what you were praying for?" He said, "I was praying that there should be peace, that there should be mutual love and respect between all the peoples in this area." And he said, "And what do you think?" says the visitor. He said, "Well, it's like talking to the wall." But there are people who think talking to walls is actually a form of divine worship in this part of the world. And it's another instance, and not that I didn't bring it up laboriously myself, but I don't mind it again, of the difference between Tony and myself when he says, he uses his giveaway phrase, "in the name of religion," rather than as a direct consequence of scriptural authority, which is what I mean when I talk about this. No one's going to deny, are they? No one is going to deny there are awards of real estate made in the Bible by none other than Jehovah himself. That land is promised to human primates over other human primates in response to a divine covenant. Excuse me. Sorry, this sometimes happens. No, that can't be denied. When David Ben-Gurion was prime minister, what he still called a secular state, he called in Yigal Yadin and Finkelstein and the other Israeli archaeologists, professional guys, and said, "Go out into the desert and dig up the title deeds to our state. You'll find our legitimate..." That was the instruction to the Department of Archaeology. They went, after they conquered Sinai and West Bank, they went even further afield, looking for some evidence Moses had ever been there. They didn't find any because there never has been and there never will be any. But you cannot say that the foundational cause, casus belli in this region, the idea that God intervenes in real estate and territorial disputes, isn't inscribed in the text itself. And not only in the Jewish text, but thanks to a foolish decision taken in the early Christian centuries, where it was decided not to dump the New Testament, but and to start again just with the Nazarene story. Great Christian theologians like Marcion were in favor of doing that. Why do we want to bring the darkness and tyranny and terror and death and blood and cultism of the first books along with us? Surely we should start again. No, we're saddling ourselves with all that. So this is a responsibility for the Christian world too. And need I add that there is no good Muslim who does not say that Allah tells us we can never give up an inch of Muslim land, and that once our mosques are built there can be no retreat. It would be a betrayal. It would lead you straight to hell. In other words, yes, they gibber and jabber, all of them, the three religions. Yeah, you're quite right. God awards land. It's just you've got the wrong title. No. This is what I mean when I say the religion is a real danger to the survival of civilization, and that it makes this banal regional national dispute, which if reduced to its real proportions is a nothingness, if it makes that not just lethally insoluble, but is drawing in other contending parties who really openly wish, for an apocalyptic conclusion to it, as also bodied forth in the same scriptural texts. In other words, that it will be the death of us all, the end of humanity, the end of the world, the end of the whole suffering vale of tears, which is what they secretly want. This is a failure of the parties of God, and it's not something that happens because people misinterpret the texts. It's because they believe in them. That's the problem. Thank you.
Tony, would you like a quick rejoinder, or can I move on to our final question for this session?
If you like.
Well, great. We have I think, the perfect final question. and it's from another student at the Munk School for Global Affairs, Dana Wagner. Where are you, Dana? Here you are.
A big part of this issue is our inability to stand in another's shoes with an open mind to understand a different worldview. In this regard, can each of you tell us which of your opponent's arguments is the most convincing? Thank you.
Right. Now, this definitely never happened in the House of Commons. I think that the most convincing argument is, and the argument that people of faith have got to deal with, is actually the argument that Christopher's just made, which is that the bad that is done in the name of religion is intrinsically grounded in the scripture of religion. Right? That is the single most difficult argument. And since I've said it's a really difficult argument, I suppose I better give an answer to it. My answer to it is this, that there is, of course, that debate that goes on within religion, which is the degree to which, as it were, you look at Scripture abstracted from its time, you pick out individual parts of it, you use those in order to justify whatever view you like, or whether, as I tried to do in my opening, you actually say, well, what is the essence of that faith? And what is the essence of Scripture? And of course, then what you realize is that, yes, of course, if you believe as a Muslim that we should live our lives according to the 7th century, then you will end up with some very extreme positions. But actually, there are masses of Muslims who completely reject that as a view of Islam, and instead say, no, of course, the Prophet back then was somebody who brought order and stability, and actually, for example, even though we today would want equality for women, and many, again, despite what people say, many Muslims would agree with that as well, and many Muslim women, obviously. Back then, actually, what he did was extraordinary for that time. And also, when you look at Christianity, yes, of course, you can point to issues that, of that time, now seem very strange and outdated. But on the other hand, when you take Christianity as a whole and ask what it means to those, what draws people to it, what is it that made me as a student come to Christianity? It wasn't to do with some of the things that Christopher's just been describing, and I understand there are those traditions within religion. I understand that. I accept that. I see how people look at certain parts of Scripture and draw those conclusions from it. But it's not what it means to me. It's not the essence of it. The essence of it is, through the life of Jesus Christ, is a life of love and selflessness and sacrifice. And that's what it means to me. And so I think the most difficult thing for people of faith is to be able to explain Scripture in a way that makes sense to people in the modern world. And one of the things that we have actually begun recently is a dialogue called The Common Word, which is about Muslims and Christians trying to come together and, through Scripture, find a common basis of cooperation and mutual respect. So, yes, it is a difficult argument. That is the most difficult argument. I agree. But I also think there is an answer to it. And I think one of the values, actually, of having a debate like this, and in a sense having someone making that point as powerfully as Christopher has made it, is that it does force people of faith to recognize that we have to deal with this argument, to take it on, and to make sure that not just in what we are trying to do, but in how we interpret our faith, we are making sure that what I describe as the essence of faith, which is serving God through the love of others, is indeed reflected not just in what we do, but in the doctrines and the practice of our religion.
Admirable question. Thank you for it. The remark Tony made that I most agreed with this evening, I'll just hope that doesn't sound too minimal, was when he said that if religion was to disappear, things would by no means, as it were, automatically be okay. I mean, he phrased it better than that. But it would be what I regard as a necessary condition, would certainly not be a sufficient one. And anyway, religion won't disappear. I just think the hold of it on people's minds can be substantially broken and domesticated. He's quite right about that, of course. I hope I didn't seem at any point to have argued to the contrary. I come before you, after all, as a materialist. If we give up religion, we discover what actually we know already, whether we're religious or not, which is that we are somewhat imperfectly evolved primates on a very small planet in a very unimportant suburb of a solar system that is itself a negligible part of a very rapidly expanding and blowing apart cosmic phenomenon. These conclusions, to me, are a great deal more awe-inspiring than what's contained in any burning bush or horse that flies overnight to Jerusalem or any other of that. It's a great deal more awe-inspiring, as is any look through the Hubble telescope at what our real nature and future really is. So he was quite right to say that, and I would have been entirely wrong if I'd implied otherwise. I think I could say a couple of things for religion myself, would in fact. First is what I call the apotropaic. We all have it, the desire not to be found claiming all the credit. A certain kind of modesty, you could almost say humility. People will therefore say they'll thank God when something happens that they're grateful for. Or there's no need to make this a religious thing. The Greeks had the concept of hubris as something to be avoided and criticized. But what the Greeks would also have called the apotropaic, the view that not all the glory can be claimed by a load of primates like ourselves, is a healthy reminder too. Second, the sense that there's something beyond the material, or if not beyond it, not entirely consistent materially with it, is, I think, a very important matter. What you could call the numinous, or the transcendent, or at its best, I suppose, the ecstatic. I wouldn't trust anyone in this hall who didn't know what I was talking about. We know what we mean by it when we think about certain kinds of music, perhaps. Certainly the relationship, or the coincidence, but sometimes very powerful, between music and love. Landscape, certain kinds of artistic and creative work that appears not to have been done entirely by hand. Without this, we really would merely be primates. I think it's very important to appreciate the finesse of that, and I think religion has done a very good job in enshrining it in music and in architecture, not so much in painting, in my opinion. And I think it's actually very important that we learn to distinguish the numinous in this way. I wrote a book about the Parthenon. I'll mention it briefly. I couldn't live without the Parthenon. I don't believe any civilized person could. If it was to be destroyed, you'd feel something much worse than the destruction of the first temple had occurred, it seems to me. But we've lost an enormous amount besides by way of our knowledge of symmetry and grace and harmony. But I don't care about the cult of Pallas Athena. It's gone. And as far as I know, it's not to be missed. The Eleusinian mysteries have been demystified. The sacrifices, some of them human, that were made to those gods are regrettable, but have been blotted out and forgotten. And Athenian imperialism is also a thing of the past. What remains is the fantastic beauty and the